Hello history lovers and welcome back to my channel. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. You done it? You sure? Good. And let's continue our deep dive into the life of Queen Anne Boleyn. We continue Anne's story in late 1528. Henry and Anne's relationship is starting to heat up, and as such, so does Anne's position at court. There's only one problem. Henry is still married, and he still has a queen. Catherine. Henry is now in the process of trying to get his marriage to Catherine annulled. Cardinal Lorenzo Campeggio arrived at Dover on the 29th of December 1528 to annul Henry's marriage.
Liar!
Campeggio was actually sent by the Pope to try and delay the potential divorce/annulment proceedings for as long as possible. In all honesty, he probably had no intent of annulling the marriage, as that would upset too many powerful people. Campeggio met with Thomas Wolsey on the 9th of October and they spent 3 to 4 hours discussing His Majesty's great matter. Unsurprisingly, Campeggio, whose aim was to keep the King and Queen together, said that the best solution would be if the King and Queen reconciled. On the 22nd of October 1528, the legate met the King at Bridewell Palace, along the Thames. Henry's reaction was pretty Henry-like.
What? Okay, fine, I'm cool, I'm fine.
Henry was furious by Campeggio's suggestion that he reconcile with the Queen. The legate proposed an idea from the Pope to persuade Catherine to join a convent. If she could be assured that her daughter's rights would be protected, it might be best for everyone if she left gracefully, avoiding further complications. The Pope could grant Henry a divorce, and the Emperor would have no grounds to object. Catherine was informed of this decision 2 days later, but refused. Henry continued to appear with Catherine in public to maintain appearances. However, in private, he seldom visited her. When he did, they often argued, and he couldn't stay long, fearing Anne Boleyn's jealousy. In November 1528, the French ambassador observed, "Greater court is now paid to Mistress Anne than has been to the Queen for a long time." Henry's shift in affection was now becoming more apparent in the public eye. The ambassador also noted, "I see they mean to accustom the people by degrees to endure her." Henry VIII extended an invitation to his subjects at Bridewell Palace. During this gathering, he emphasised the peace that had prevailed during his reign and expressed his fear of dying without a male heir, which could potentially lead to another civil war. He assured them that this was his sole motivation. He added, "If it was judged that Catherine was my lawful wife, nothing will be more pleasant or acceptable to me, for I assure you that she is a woman of most gentleness, humility, and bosomness. She is without comparison, so that if I were to marry again, I would choose her above all women." Despite his heartfelt words, Henry's speech failed to diminish the public's animosity towards Anne. On the 21st of June 1529, both Catherine and Henry had been summoned to Blackfriars for a court proceeding aimed at examining the validity of their marriage. By this point, Catherine was well aware that the court was not in her favour, as Henry had pretty much already chosen Anne Boleyn to be his second wife. In a dramatic moment, Catherine knelt before her husband and implored him to halt the proceedings. When he refused, she declared her intention to appeal from the 2 cardinals to Pope Clement VII in Rome, saying, "I most humbly require you, in the way of charity and for the love of God, who is the just judge, to spare me the extremity of this new court, until I may be advised that way and order my friends in Spain will advise me to taken. And if ye will not extend to me such impartial favour, your pleasure then be fulfilled, and to God I commit my cause." After Catherine's speech at Blackfriars, Henry remained silent, staring past his wife. Once she had left, he proclaimed Catherine had been as true, as obedient, and as comfortable a wife as I could in my fantasy wish or desire. He considered himself fortunate to have had such a queen, and emphasised that no fault in Catherine had moved him. He believed that his legitimate sons had all died as a punishment from God. Henry's primary concern was his succession, and he asserted that he had not started these proceedings out of any personal dislike for Catherine's person or age. He stated that he would be content to continue the marriage if it were within God's law. With the world's eyes on her, Catherine put forth a compelling performance. As far as what she could do, she played an absolute blinder. However, it ultimately proved insufficient. As Pope Clement procrastinated, Henry began parliamentary efforts to distance his kingdom from Roman jurisdiction. In 1532, he appointed Thomas Cranmer as the new Archbishop of Canterbury, who, on the 23rd of May, 1533, annulled Henry and Catherine's marriage. By then, Catherine's fate as queen had already been sealed, as Henry had secretly married Anne in November 1532. It took 6 years to fully separate from Catherine. For the first 3 years, Henry held out hope that Rome and the Pope would eventually grant his request, as he and his council could not initially see an alternative solution. Cardinal Wolsey was starting to fall from the king's favour, and during the autumn of 1529, Eustace Chapuis assumed the role of the new Spanish ambassador. Chapuis was a staunch supporter of the emperor and had no reservations about expressing his opinions. The courtiers of the king and the faction aligned with Anne Boleyn harboured strong dislike for Chapuis and were apprehensive about his influence. The sentiment was mutual, as Chapuis never referred to Anne Boleyn as anything other than the concubine or the lady. In October 1529, rumours circulated that Anne Boleyn had influenced King Henry VIII to arrange a marriage between his daughter, the Princess Mary, and the son of the Duke of Norfolk, Henry, Earl of Surrey, who was the brother of Mary Howard. This proposed union would solidify Anne's control over Princess Mary, who was the king's sole legitimate child, and until the birth of a legitimate brother, the heir to the throne. It would also ensure that no foreign suitor could lay claim to the princess or England in the future. During the same month, a significant development occurred as Wolsey was stripped of his position as Lord Chancellor of England, and the king demanded that he surrendered the Great Seal. In an effort to appease the king, Wolsey relinquished York Place and most of his other properties. King Henry renamed York Palace as Whitehall Palace, and it was refurbished as a residence for Anne, providing her with a home and court separate from Catherine. According to canon law, the fact that Henry had been intimate with Anne's sister created an issue, necessitating a papal dispensation for their marriage. Historian Giles Tremlett noted the striking double standard in this situation. While Henry disputed the validity of the papal dispensation allowing him to marry his deceased brother's widow, he saw no issue with seeking a similar dispensation to marry his former mistress's sister. Despite murmurs at court, the king asserted that his desire to marry Anne Boleyn was based on justice and not rooted in any undue love.
Right.
Thomas Cranmer, a university-educated individual with a degree in divinity, argued that the case should be decided by divine law rather than canon law, rendering papal intervention unnecessary. If the divines in the university deemed the marriage invalid, then that should be the final word. This perspective resonated with Henry and marked a significant departure from tradition. Feeling politically isolated from Europe and disillusioned with the Holy See, Henry perceived himself as an outcast from a corrupt Church of Rome, even before Cranmer's influence. Now the possibility of breaking away from Rome became increasingly real. In November 1529, Henry continued to lavish Anne with gifts, but these offerings were now more like peace offerings in the midst of their turbulent relationship. Anne accused the king of making her wait, during which time she could have entered into a beneficial marriage and had children, which, ironically, if she had, it might just have saved her life. On numerous occasions, she would even threaten to leave Henry, as she did in January 1531. Fearing the loss of Anne, Henry would implore Anne's uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, and her father to mediate, often with tears in his eyes. In March 1530, Pope Clement VII issued a brief decree prohibiting Henry VIII from entering into a new marriage until a final sentence was delivered. In the May, another brief was issued, explicitly forbidding anyone from expressing an opinion on the matter, if motivated by bribes or other ulterior motives. This ruling effectively excluded the universities that Henry had been attempting to get support from. In September 1530, the Pope suggested the idea that Henry should have 2 wives, as this solution might cause less scandal than pursuing an annulment. Emperor Charles V had offered to launch an imperial invasion on behalf of Catherine in an effort to resolve her troubles throughout the 1530s. However, Catherine declined this offer due to her unwavering loyalty to her husband. Wolsey harboured hopes of making a triumphant return to power once the great matter was resolved, but this outcome could only materialise if it were settled in Catherine's favour, as the Queen would have been grateful. On the 1st of November 1530, Anne emerged victorious in the power struggle with Wolsey. A warrant was issued for the Cardinal's arrest, and he was taken into custody on charges of high treason. On the 29th of November, while en route to the Tower of London, Wolsey succumbed to the lingering illness that had plagued him in recent months, eventually passing away at Leicester Abbey. He had been accused of treason and ordered to travel to London, but his already ailing health took a toll and he died during the journey. Following Wolsey's death, it became evident that the Pope would not grant Henry a divorce. In response to various challenges, Henry enacted a law that declared it was high treason to slander or libel the king, queen, or his heir apparent. Wolsey was laid to rest next to King Richard III in what Chapuis rather ironically referred to as the tyrant's sepulchre. The news of Wolsey's demise saddened the king, who remarked, "I wish he had lived." Meanwhile, Anne Boleyn was jubilant and even organised a court masque titled The Going to Hell of Cardinal Wolsey. Henry found this production distasteful, but Anne's temperament was so volatile at that time that he dared not to confront her. By the late 1530s, Henry started harbouring a growing sense of resentment towards Anne. On one occasion, he didn't hesitate to remind her of the considerable debts that she owed him and the multitude of enemies he had acquired on her behalf. However, Anne remained unfazed by his remarks, casually shrugging it off. It mattered not. Nonetheless, it was clear that, as noted by the Venetian ambassador, his will still held considerable sway in their relationship. In January 1531, Pope Clement issued a brief instructing Henry to separate from Anne, put away one Anne whom he kept about him. Due to Clement's actions, Henry's respect for the Holy Seal was waning, and he was increasingly paying greater heed to Anne Boleyn's supporters for reform within the Church of England. Anne's attitude towards the Queen had deteriorated to the point of intense animosity by January 1531. Chapuis reported, "The Lady Anne is braver than a lion. She said to one of the Queen's ladies that she wished all Spaniards were in the sea. The lady told her such language was disrespectful to her mistress. She said she cared nothing for the Queen and would rather see her hang than acknowledge her as her mistress." In early 1531, Chapuis reported, "She's becoming more arrogant every day, using words in authority towards the king, of which he has several times complained to the Duke of Norfolk, saying, 'She is not like the Queen, who never in her life used ill words to him.'" Anne's unfulfilled ambitions and suppressed desires had transformed her into a woman with a sharp tongue, causing her to alienate many of those who had once supported her. On the 7th of February 1531, King Henry addressed Parliament, demanding that the Church of England acknowledge him as its supreme head. Parliament dared not defy the King's decree. Consequently, the Church of England would no longer recognise the Pope and would refer to him as the Bishop of Rome. England's religious principles remained predominantly Catholic, and little changed apart from the leadership. On New Year's Day in 1532, Anne Boleyn returned to the court, and was lodged where the Queen used to be, and is accompanied by almost as many ladies as if she were Queen. As mentioned earlier, during the Christmas and New Year's period of that year, Henry bestowed upon Anne a splendidly adorned room with cloth of gold and silver, along with intricately embroidered satin. And, also as mentioned earlier, Mary Boleyn was given a lavish gift from the King. Being the recipient of such a gift on this occasion strongly suggests that Mary was back at court, probably as one of Anne's vast train of ladies, and other evidence shows that she was periodically in attendance on her sister from this time, if she had not been before. In August 1532, Anne stumbled upon a crude picture of herself with her head cut off. She confided in her maid of honour, Anne Saville, expressing her unwavering determination to marry the king, and that "my issue may be royal, whatever will become of me." She dismissed the picture as nothing more than a mere bauble. Anne's animosity towards her stepdaughter Mary was as intense as her feelings towards Mary's mother. Henry was cautious not to praise Mary and kept his visits to her as brief as possible in Anne's presence, fearful of triggering her vicious temper. On the 1st of September 1532, Henry made Anne the Marquess of Pembroke. The wording in the Patent of Creation left room for speculation, notably the omission of the phrase "lawfully begotten" when referring to male heirs who might inherit the title. This omission held significant implications. It is strongly suggested that Anne had finally consummated her relationship with the king. Some even believed their sexual relations had commenced as early as the 22nd of August, coinciding with the Archbishop of Warham's death, and the subsequent appointment of Thomas Cranmer. It was a risk, but it wouldn't be long before the king could marry Anne. The ceremony in September had been arranged hastily, ensuring Anne would have both status and financial security if the king were to die suddenly. The consummation of their relationship only deepened Henry's infatuation with Anne. The Venetian ambassador marvelled at his great appetite for her. Chapuis noted that the king could not leave her for an hour. Henry claims that Anne had been corrupted during her youth at the French court, discovering that she had had some sexual experience, even if she technically remained a virgin, may have been disconcerting for Henry, especially given Anne's constant declarations of wanting to preserve her virtue until marriage. Anne's brother George Boleyn was part of her court, as was her sister-in-law Jane Boleyn, of whom Anne was quite fond of. Mary carried the mantle of crimson velvet adorned with ermine, and a coronet that Anne would place on her head after receiving the title Marquess of Pembroke. Glittering with royal jewels and clad in a matching surcoat of crimson velvet, also trimmed with ermine, Anne approached the king, knelt, and received a patent of creation. She became the first woman to receive a noble title in her own right, as women typically acquired courtesy titles by marriage. And this is where I'm going to leave today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. But until the next one, have a wonderful day.